So Clint Smith, a Harvard University professor and a speaker at TED Talks, once said, "Those who support the death penalty are accepting a practice that is both ineffective and fundamentally flawed." This is very true. The death penalty has been used by almost every society as a form of punishment for centuries, but it is time to do away with this old and barbaric practice. It needs to be abolished, starting in the US and moving to China, Iraq, and many more countries. It does more harm to society than good. So first of all, it puts the innocent lives at risk. There will always be cases where innocent people are prosecuted for crimes they did not commit. So how can we use capital punishment when we know our justice system is fallible? Execution is not reversible, so why take the risk of killing the wrong person? This has already happened in the past, and based on figures, is still happening today. Let's look at the case of Carlos de Luna. He was executed in 1989 for stabbing a gas station clerk in Corpus Christi, but did he? A study from the Columbia University team found that there was a high chance this man was innocent. In the case, they found shoddy police work, that the prosecution did not pursue other suspects, and that de Luna could not afford good representation. A man that may have not committed this crime was sentenced to death all because of the justice system's lack of due diligence. How can we support the death of innocent people? Since 1973, 144 people on death row have been exonerated, some mere minutes before execution. A study released by the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences found a shocking figure that 1 in every 25 people sentenced to death in the US is innocent. On top of this, with the advancements in DNA evidence, many death row inmates have been exonerated. Imagine being charged with a crime you did not commit, like murder, and sentenced to death. You spend years in prison pleading your innocence, but it does you no good, and at the end you are executed. Nobody wants this, but it's a natural risk that comes with the use of capital punishment. It is time to abolish this practice for the innocent people that have lost their lives. Additionally, the death penalty also violates our basic human rights. Life is the most basic human right as declared in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but capital punishment denies us this. We also have the right to freedom from torture, inhumane or degrading treatment, and punishment, yet being on death row is a form of psychological torture, waiting for death in a prison cell in abhorrent conditions. Governments using a punishment like death conflicts completely with human rights. How can we place faith in a justice system that doesn't even value our basic rights as a human being? We should seek a justice system that values our rights and can be held to certain standards. It is time for us to put an end to the death penalty for the sake of modern society. Now, many proponents of capital punishment like to say that it has some deterrent effect, but this is simply not true. There is no credible statistical evidence that the death penalty deters crime. If the death penalty fails at its main selling point, then what is the point of it? It serves no purpose. Canada, who doesn't use the death penalty, and the US, who enforces capital punishment in certain states, do not show a significant difference in homicide rates, yet one uses the death penalty. This fact appears again when comparing Hong Kong and Singapore. One uses the punishment while the other does not, yet there is no detectable difference in homicide rates. On top of this, 85% of the world's leading criminologists don't believe the death penalty acts as a deterrent to homicide. In fact, some studies believe that the death penalty may make criminals more cautious and careful when committing crimes. There is zero evidence that the death penalty provides any tangible benefits. Simply put, the death penalty does not achieve any of its goals. Next, the cost of enforcing capital punishment is huge when compared to other sentences. A study in Oklahoma found that seeking the death penalty costs significantly more and takes more time and effort when compared to life in prison or other punishments for first-degree murder cases. Oklahoma capital punishment cases costed $3.2 million more than non-capital cases in Oklahoma. This is just one study of many. Washington, New Mexico, Nebraska, and many more states have come to the same conclusion, that capital punishment costs way more. Also, appealing capital cases costs 5 to 6 times more than non-capital appeals on first-degree murder cases. All these costs can make seeking the death penalty hundreds of thousands of dollars more than any other sentence. The death penalty is wasting the money from taxpayers that could be used for many better options. Overall, capital punishment is costing the government in the US over $100 million that could be used for better things. Abolishing the death penalty will save the government money and allow them to invest in things that will benefit us. The death penalty is also unjust and is not used equally on criminals. Firstly, 50% of people sentenced to death between 2001 to 2006 were African American, despite them being only 13% of the population, and this figure is still on the rise to this day. The death penalty is also sought more often in cases where the victim was Caucasian rather than black or other races. Additionally, the death penalty is also discriminatory to the poor. The verdict reached in most cases depends on the quality of one's defense team. And more often than not, the poor cannot afford or get good lawyers. We cannot support a practice when citizens are not prosecuted fairly or equally. You never see the rich on death row. Lastly, there is rehabilitation. The purpose of prison is to put away criminals, make them see the error of their ways, and hopefully try and lead them to rehabilitation. But capital punishment does not support this end. Forcing the death penalty will not encourage criminals to better themselves and change. The very purpose of prison is not even supported by this sentence. To conclude, the death penalty is a failure at everything it tries to achieve. It is a detriment to society, it puts innocent lives at risk, violates our human rights, fails to deter crime, costs way too much for what little it does, it's discriminatory to minorities and the poor, and lastly, it fails to support rehabilitation. It is our duty to put an end to this unjust, archaic, and barbaric form of punishment that does us no good. We must abolish the death penalty.